The report about China's J-20 stealth fighters allegedly flying undetected through the Tsushima Strait presents a case study in how governments use information for strategic influence, not just communication. This claim, which originates exclusively from Chinese state media, lacks independent verification and should be analyzed in the context of China's long-standing approach to controlling narratives, projecting power, and undermining the confidence of its regional adversaries. The Tsushima Strait is a narrow, heavily monitored airspace between Japan and the Korean peninsula, sitting at the junction of the East China Sea and the Sea of Japan. It is surrounded by the territories and military detection networks of Japan, South Korea, and the United States, nations that collectively maintain one of the most advanced and interconnected regional surveillance systems in the world. These nations regularly monitor and respond to unauthorized or suspicious aerial activity, even when it involves relatively unsophisticated or conventional aircraft. A stealth aircraft flying through this area without any of these countries acknowledging or reacting to the event is highly unusual and strains credibility, particularly when the only source of the information is from the government that benefits most from the perception of success. Chinese state media is not an independent press. It is an instrument of the Chinese Communist Party and serves the specific role of crafting and disseminating stories that reflect the party's interests, reinforce its control over the domestic population, and shape global perception of China's power. It does not operate under principles of transparency, investigative inquiry, or journalistic independence. When Chinese state media makes a claim about the success of its military operations, especially one that involves an event with potentially high strategic consequences, it must be evaluated as a piece of controlled messaging rather than a neutral report. The motivation for China to release a story like this is multifaceted. On the domestic front, such reports serve to boost national pride, reinforce the perception of technological progress, and strengthen the image of the military as capable of challenging and potentially outperforming foreign powers. This narrative is useful in sustaining political legitimacy and unity under the ruling party, especially in a system that equates national strength with the effectiveness of its leadership. Internationally, a report suggesting that Chinese stealth fighters can operate in highly contested airspace without detection serves a very different strategic purpose. It is intended to sow doubt among adversaries about the reliability of their surveillance systems, create psychological pressure on regional militaries, and elevate the perceived threat posed by China's expanding air power. It also complicates the task of military planners in countries like Japan, South Korea, and the United States, who must determine whether the event actually occurred and, if it did, whether it signals a genuine leap in Chinese stealth technology or a new tactic in misdirection. China has frequently engaged in information operations aimed at amplifying the perception of its military capabilities beyond what has been conclusively demonstrated. This pattern has been evident across various domains, including naval development, missile systems, and air power. The tactic often involves releasing limited information about a supposed breakthrough, offering no independently verifiable evidence, and relying on state-run outlets to repeat and amplify the claim. This approach ensures maximum domestic and international impact while minimizing the risk of exposure if the claim is inaccurate or exaggerated. The J-20 itself is a real aircraft, and there is no doubt that it represents an important milestone in China's military aviation development. However, it is also well documented that the aircraft has faced significant challenges in engine development, radar cross-section management, and sensor integration, critical elements for any true fifth-generation fighter. The suggestion that the J-20 has now reached a level of performance where it can freely penetrate one of the most defended air corridors in the world without detection requires extraordinary proof, and no such proof has been provided. It is also important to understand the broader context in which this claim is being made. China is engaged in a long-term campaign to challenge the influence and presence of the United States and its allies in East Asia. It views Japan and South Korea not only as neighboring states but as extensions of U.S. military power in the region. Demonstrating, or appearing to demonstrate, the ability to operate freely in their proximity without being detected as a direct challenge to their defense posture. It is also a warning that China intends to contest airspace, sea lanes, and territory that it considers within its expanding sphere of influence. The absence of any official acknowledgement or alarm from Japan, South Korea, or the United States about such an event further reduces the likelihood that it happened as described. These nations do not routinely suppress information about foreign military activity near or within their monitored zones. On the contrary, they have regularly made such incidents public, particularly when they involve airspace violations or close encounters. Their silence in this case is notable and supports the interpretation that the event either did not occur, occurred in a different form, or did not meet the threshold for serious concern. Furthermore, if Chinese aircraft had truly penetrated the Tsushima Strait undetected, this would represent a significant failure for the regional detection infrastructure. Such a failure would likely lead to internal assessments, reviews of radar coverage, and procedural adjustments. The fact that there has been no indication of such activity from any of the regional defense establishments casts serious doubt on the authenticity of the Chinese narrative. China's strategy here aligns with its broader use of psychological operations. These efforts are designed not necessarily to deceive entirely, but to introduce enough ambiguity to cause doubt, hesitation, or overreaction in opposing forces. By presenting scenarios that cannot be easily verified or disproven, China places the burden on its rivals to react to potentially exaggerated threats, divert resources, and alter operational planning based on uncertain information. This is not an isolated case, but rather part of a consistent and deliberate strategy to manipulate perception and influence regional security dynamics without engaging in open conflict. The J-20 narrative is tailored to send a message: China can strike where and when it wants, even in areas where its adversaries feel most secure. Whether or not the mission occurred is described as secondary to the impact the claim is designed to have on the strategic environment. In reality, the operational effectiveness of the J-20 remains a work in progress, and the Chinese military's actual ability to conduct successful stealth missions in contested airspace is still uncertain. While the aircraft represents progress in indigenous aerospace development, it does not yet match the proven performance of more mature platforms in use by other powers. The claim of undetected flight over such a sensitive region is best understood not as a factual military development, but as a component of China's larger strategy of narrative dominance and psychological positioning. The goal is not simply to inform, it is to alter how others think, plan, and respond.